Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. A very, very warm welcome to this high-level session, Sourcing the Green Deal. And of course, if you're joining us for the first time, this is a brilliant time to be joining. You're here right at the moment when you're going to get all sorts of information in the next 90 minutes from a host of brilliant brains. My name is Katrina Sickle. I'm a broadcaster and moderator, and I'm joining you from Brussels, from the CEPI premises. I just want to give you all a little reminder that this event has been designed for maximum interactivity. So not only can you tweet at any time, #paper and beyond, but I'm also going to be asking you to take part in polls and to pose questions to our speakers along the way in this session. And of course, I have one of those speakers right here with me now. The gentleman at the requisite social distance is, of course, the Director General of CEPI, Jori Ringman. So a very, very warm welcome to you. It's lovely to see you back with me. You're going to kick off this high-level session. Now, I've just said to the ladies and gentlemen that they can pose questions. That does actually include questions for you in this first part. So, ladies and gentlemen, in fact, before the posing questions, I'm going to ask you all please to take part in a poll. Now, I have the poll. You'll see that on screen, on the right-hand side of your screen. I've got the poll on the iPad. And the question to you is, please, this sector is an industry of the future with much to offer to society. So there we go. At the moment, you have 100% people strongly agreeing, Jori, but we're going to give them a chance to see if anybody is not really so sure, or if there's anybody in there who strongly disagrees. We've got one vote, so I'm waiting a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. I'm looking down the lens at you to please wake up after your lunch and take part in that poll. And if I need to give you a bit of time, we can always come back to that a little bit later. So, I was going to ask you, Jori, what you think of the response, but at the moment that's one person there 100% thinking that this really is a sector, an industry of the future with much to offer society. What do you think if I'd asked you that question?
I think it is true that we are a sector of the future that has a lot to offer for the society. And it's great that it was showing 100% trust in that, because, you know, we are facing in the next few years so many big challenges that if we don't have this almost like a sportsman's attitude on trusting ourselves that yes, we can do it, we won't be able to do it. So we need to have this confidence in ourselves. If we don't, who does?
Yes, and indeed, at the end of that first session that Claire was moderating, I heard you say that the real importance actually is that collaboration between people, and that includes kind of having that very positive and determined attitude and that optimism about the industry. So just in a nutshell, this session does have a narrative. It's a session in 3 parts. We're kicking off the first part, which is effectively the substitution effect of forest-based products. That's what we're broadly focusing on here. But tell us about this high-level session as a whole. What should we expect to cover?
Well, maybe start with the context. So you know that the European Commission is introducing this Green Deal that is trying to turn the big societal challenges into opportunities. So being the growth strategy for the EU. And that will change profoundly the way we Europeans live, how we eat, what we wear, how we work, how we move around. And this sector, the pulp and paper industry, we have something to offer to all of that. So we can be the green source of the European Green Deal and make it happen and make it succeed. So this is, in the nutshell, why we have this session. And then we will look into the substitution effect, so what our products can do in the society, what that can offer in helping to achieve these bold targets that the EU has. Then we will look into energy and climate change, and then the forestry issues.
Yeah, okay, so it's worth people staying online for the 90 minutes because it is a story, and ladies and gentlemen, you need to hear all of that story. Now, you said you believe you can be a resilient green source for the European Green Deal. It seems to be especially important for your industry. Do you want to just expand on that for me?
Yeah, I think it's so, because of course we are there for ourselves as well, but we are also there for the society and for the rest of the economy. And we can indeed be this injection of green and resilience exactly what the politicians want for all the other parts of the economy. Because we are so closely linked to the many other value chains in textiles, in green chemistry, in construction, in
Even healthcare.
food and agri, healthcare, exactly, pharmaceuticals, you name it. It's all that. So we can really be helping this whole of the economy bounce forward like the Commission wants. But then for our sector, this is also a critical moment because in the poll we didn't see these people doubting, and there might have been some stakeholders who didn't really.
I'm just having a look now at the poll. Let me tell you, because you can't see it at the moment. And no, we've got 84% strongly agreeing it's an industry of the future with much to offer. 16% agreeing, still okay. Nobody is disagreeing. Nobody is strongly disagreeing.
That's great, but our audience might be a bit biased, but if you went to the street and asked people the same question just randomly, they might not even know our sector. And this is the big challenge we have, that we are not known to be the innovative sector of the future that we truly are. And without us, I first claim that the Green Deal will not succeed. And secondly, I think the big risk is that we might be the collateral damage of the many unintended consequences of the big policy rollout that we now see. So this could be a real threat also for us. And it's alarming because we are very committed as a sector investing in Europe. We invest about 5 billion euros every year. And this is twice as much as manufacturing sectors on average. So these investments are actually the thing that are at risk here.
Okay, so let's just expand a little bit on that, because you've been clear that your sector is committed. There's been a lot of action taken. I keep quoting you about this tsunami of policy and legislation. So I think, well, sounds good. But I hear from you, Katrina, we need to be a little bit cautious. I was hoping that with all of these factors on the table, everything dovetails, things will go well. But I think you're sort of sounding not a note of alarm, but of caution.
Yeah, it is a critical moment in the sense that it can go this way or that way. So, of course, we have these opportunities as well. But like you said, I've often used this expression that the Green Deal is a tsunami of policies and legislation that is now hitting us for this year and next year, and maybe still something in the next waves. And that will profoundly challenge businesses and industries, including our industry. And it is now that the future is being decided for us for the next years to come. And plus, this green recovery is injecting a lot of money. Hundreds of billions of euros will be inserted in the EU economy now. And either it could go to our competitors in other materials, or it can go for a fair share that we need for us as well. So that's also other aspect where it can go either way. We don't know.
Okay. So if I need to just sort of hone in on areas where you're saying could go here, could go there, where things from the policy-making side, perhaps intuitively you think things might not go as well as you would hope? What areas would you say this is where policymakers might be barking up the wrong tree or not thinking right?
Yeah, exactly, because the situation is new also for the policymakers, which is understandable.
And they have a lot on their plate.
They have
huge
a lot of
demands from all sectors.
Yeah. So they have maybe the biggest challenge of any generation of politicians after the war in front of them. And then they might make these political knee-jerk reactions that are sort of quick reactions, but not making sense. So intuitively, I think four things could go wrong by the policy makers.
Just four?
Just four, but they are quite big for our sector.
Okay.
So first one would be that they intuitively might think that the economy is actually standing on the pillars of the fossil-intensive industries. And they might direct huge resources just to keep these zombies walking. And that would be simply a silly thing to do, because we have better alternatives available on the market. Secondly, it could go wrong because intuitively politicians will become more protectionist. This is already alarming for us as an export sector, but it could also miss just the resilient industry we have here in our sector, and miss also the European forest as a huge renewable resource we have in our hands. So, Katrina, did you know that what you can now do from fossil resources, you can also do from wood, but just better?
But
And
the
that's
truth is, if you're asking me, no, I didn't know. And I think that
exactly.
also as a consumer, when you say our audience, our industry perhaps isn't known well enough for its
Voila.
achievements, you also need your consumer to be on side, do you not? So my answer to you is no, I did not know.
Exactly. Well, the fourth thing that I would mention that could go awfully wrong is that intuitively the politicians might want to dedicate large areas of the forest as a passive sink
Yeah,
for
yeah.
CO2. And this is maybe the way of thinking or working from the past. But now the threat for the forest is not the man in the forest, but it's actually the man outside the forest
Yeah.
causing all these climate change and other. So for that, it's not the solution to have passive protection of the forest for this or that purpose, but just to have the active, smart, climate smart, sustainable forest management that would help actually mobilize this renewable resource we have in Europe for us.
Indeed. And I think, and I know, sorry, not I think, but I know that we are going to talk in more detail, particularly in the third part of this narrative, all
Absolutely.
about that, because it is complex. Now, I'm going to stop you there for a moment, if I may, because as I understand it, you've got a really nice clip called The Green Source, which kind of helps to crystallize some of those comments that you've just made in this opening between us. So I'm going to, ladies and gentlemen, ask you just to relax for a moment and ask our technicians to please play that video. Thank you. So there we have that. It was a really beautiful video, actually. I think it's a really nicely produced clip. It's very clear. So tell us a little bit more about these solutions. This, to me, very aptly titled Green Source.
Well, to start with, the question we are going to answer with this green source is the question society now has awoken to, where they have realized that the very complex global value chains are very risky and vulnerable, as we saw in this crisis. So there's more focus on where and how we manufacture the things we still need in the society. And until recently, the EU economy has been depending on imported inputs. So about 75% of our economy was coming from outside. And if you think about pulp and paper sector, it's more than the inverse of that. We are largely based on European input in the European value chain. So it's a huge contrast in that. So we are sourced, we are manufactured, we are recycled in Europe with European technology. So that value chain and value added is generated here in Europe by Europeans for Europeans.
And would you, sorry to interrupt flow there, but would you therefore say that that's a very good description of resilience?
Absolutely.
Is it not?
That is hitting the nail on the resilience. And in addition, we are exporting more than 20% of our production. So it's generating also income for the society, which is needed to then recover as an economy. So that's very important to understand what is so unique about our sector.
Yeah. Okay, what I'm going to just ask you now about is, I mean, again, that's a very unique, I would say, ecosystem within Europe, because you're talking about everything across the value chain, including the technology, aren't you? Including the recycling, including the fibres. So that's very impressive. Let's just put the spotlight on something that's arisen earlier, which is, of course, the circular economy. And the European Commission has adopted the new Circular Economy Action Plan. We know that, and that's one of the main blocks of the European Green Deal. Would you say that your industry has embraced that?
I think we have more than embraced that, because we were recycling already before the word was known and used. So that's really something that is deep in our sector. But even with the fresh fibers, and this is something even some people in our own sector don't realize, that we are using large quantities of residues from other industry sectors to produce the fresh fibers, and we are of course part of the natural cycles as well. And when you talk about circular economy, I have to say that we are multiple circularity champions. So it's not only the fibers, but it's water, it's heat, it's chemicals, it's residues, you name it. You have a lot of recycling and circular operations going on. And in that, when I say we are champions, I really mean this attitude that you are performing high and you aim to reach higher. But even if we know recycling so well, we also know something that might be new to you, that it can't be the only solution for the society. So circular economy is not alone enough.
And just expand on that, because I think it's important that to be very, very clear on why it's not the only solution.
Well, actually, it's because in human life, nothing is perfect. And also circular economy. And I'm not talking about paper and board or fiber recycling. I'm talking about any material in the society. So even in circular economy, nothing is perfect. So when you collect, sort and recycle and reuse, there's always losses. Well, then also there's the fact that if we want to grow as an economy, so what you can collect from yesterday's consumption, which is then less than 100% already in itself with these losses, it's not going to be enough for tomorrow's needs if we are growing as an economy. And then as an export continent, we also, of course, have some production that is not available back in recycling here. So we have these three areas of losses in the system, the growth needs and the export, that actually require that there's continuous replenishment of the material stocks in the EU economy. And my answer would be that let's use the renewable materials that we can have from the forest-based sectors and then replenish with that as a priority, the EU economy.
Okay, thank you. And may I just apologise if anybody, and if any of our audience heard my phone, I have it here just for the timing, but actually that was Trump trying to call me because I'm giving him a bit of therapy about whether he's going to step down or not. So, but I actually prioritised you, Yuri, over Trump.
Great.
So I hope you feel happy.
Not that I need therapy more than him, but...
no, you don't do? We don't know. Well, I would have to say with the ambitions you have, you may well need therapy more than him with what you've got coming ahead. So you've been very clear, very direct about the part your industry can play. Is there, I mean, you have needs from the EU, from the policymakers. Why should the EU give priority to forest-based materials?
Well, actually, because that's then linking to the maybe the biggest challenge that we want to solve with the Green Deal, which is the climate change and mitigate that. And my claim is that there's no other way that is faster, more effective and more cost-efficient way of mitigating climate change than using these forest-based materials. The reason is that with all the paper and board, is it recycled or fresh or whatever, you have something in the DNA that is 3S. So you have sequestration, you have storage and substitution of CO2. And Katrina, you surely knew that forest is a big sink of CO2. So every year, the European forest is absorbing about 400 million tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. But it might come as a news to you that also the products made from forest-based materials have an equally important effect in mitigating climate change. So in total, the sink, the storage and the substitution effect are about 20% of the EU total CO2 emissions per year. That's huge. But it's not even the full potential yet. So we have a lot of potential to tap into. So if we don't keep the fossils in the ground and we keep on keeping these zombies walking and putting up these materials, we won't ever have enough resources to win this challenge of climate change. But if we keep the fossils in the ground, we substitute it with low carbon products, then we have chances of actually getting to the goal of the EU of becoming the climate neutral continent by 2050. But for that we have to empower the consumers, because they have to do the right thing. They have to choose the renewable materials or products over the fossil products.
Yeah, and I think this morning, and I'm just keeping my eye on the clock here, don't worry, I think we heard that there has been a lot of consumer information, perhaps consumer knowledge in the domain of plastics, but certainly less here. You said yourself, we need to be more vocal, and it's not just with the policymakers, because the consumers need to also empower the policymakers to make those decisions. And very interesting, and again, we're going to talk more about the 3 S's later. It's not just about the carbon sink. It's more than that. So a last question for you before we see another video from an MEP, but I hold for a moment, just in a nutshell, coming back to your favourite phrase about this tsunami of policy and legislation, can you just put your finger on 1 or 2 of the more important policy developments?
Actually, they are all very critical for us, and we have historically never faced such a big amount of policies that are really critical for our sector in one go as we now have. But if you force me to pick 2, it's actually the things that will be part of this high-level session, and it's energy and climate change, and secondly, the forest strategy that will be then published next year.
Okay.
So those 2.
Thank you very much. And as I said, helpfully, actually, for you, our audience, we do have a video message from MEP Petri Sarvamaa, who is, of course, the rapporteur for the European Parliament's I&I report on the forest strategy. Let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, during this 5-minute video, that you can post a question or 2 for Yuri. Keep super, super short, please. They will be curated for popularity, relevance and conciseness, because I do keep my eye on the clock. But before that, enjoy. Let's have a listen to our MEP. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, forests, forestry and the forest-based sector have a crucial role in achieving many of the EU's objectives, including the Green Deal and the transition to circular bioeconomy. The European Parliament adopted its position on the new EU forest strategy last month. The message is clear. The economic, social and ecological sustainability of forests must be taken into consideration in a balanced way. The report emphasizes the important role of sustainable forest management, multifunctional role of forests, and the bioeconomy at a time when forestry is playing a major role in the fight against climate change and in the transition to a fossil-free society. We need an ambitious, independent and holistic EU forest strategy for the post-2020 period. The role of the new EU forest strategy as an effective coordination tool between the various EU forest-related policies should also be promoted. As said, we actually do need a holistic EU forest strategy. In other words, the EU forest strategy should take into account the forest-based value chain as a whole, and it should promote a stable and predictable regulatory environment for the forest-based industry. We need continuously new innovations, wood-based products and investments, which are a crucial part in resolving the challenges of our time. However, this holistic point of view should not only concentrate on sustainable forest management, but also on the important services that forests can provide, and which are almost completely missing from the current EU discussions. The substitution of fossil-based raw materials and energy. Dear friends, Forests should not only be seen as carbon sinks and neither as compensating for the other sector's emissions. Nevertheless, the Parliament's position on the EU forest strategy sends a clear and strong message. We need to strengthen the overall climate benefits stemming from forests and the forest-based value chain holistically, including the substitution of fossil-based alternatives and alternatives with a higher environmental footprint in industries such as construction, textiles, chemicals and packaging. The Parliament also highlights the underused advantages of sustainable wood-based products in replacing single-use products, for example plastics. The circular use of wood-based products should also be increased for the deployment of a circular bioeconomy. In addition, the report encourages the Commission to explore different market-based mechanisms in order to incentivize substitution of fossil fuels by renewable raw materials. And furthermore, the Parliament calls to increase funding for research on the substitution of fossil fuels and fossil fuel materials. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the forest-based industry offers multiple solutions to the challenges of our time, and this should definitely be highlighted across the European Union. Thank you.
So we heard there right at the end, offers multiple solutions to the challenges of our times. Now, I see we have no questions, which means basically that you have done a splendid job, literally, because you've covered so many different areas, people don't feel frustrated. But if there is one kind of takeaway before I lose you, because I won't see you again in this high-level session, what would you really like to underline? Let's say we're chatting, you and I, in a pub, a British pub or a brasserie. What's the most important kind of takeaway from this first part of the high-level session?
Well, maybe two things. One is that I sometimes feel that our sector is like the good pupil in the class, that the teacher is somehow neglecting because she's only focusing on the troublemakers in the back of the class.
Right.
And then this is sometimes the trouble of the policymakers, that they don't see these well-behaving, well-doing industries in Europe, and they are somehow blind to us. Mm-hmm. And they are only focusing in making these other troublemakers behave that didn't behave in the past when we did all the things, our homework.
Yep.
The second thing is that such a big policy package as the Green Deal is having this problem for the policymakers to get it in balance.
Yeah.
So too much of this or too much of that, you always get less than optimal outcome. And it's this optimization of seeing this big picture, even in the policies and across the policies, that is going to be the big challenge for the policymakers. And thanks, we have these kind of policymakers like Mr. Sarvamaa, who just spoke, who obviously sees this big picture. But this, not losing the big picture when doing the details of the Green Deal, would be the second big ask we have for the policymakers.
Indeed. I'm just, here we go. We do have a question here coming in from Paul Brannan. So actually I'm going to look at the screen because otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, I'm squinting down at this iPad with my very poor eyesight. There we go. You can see the question yourself, Yuri. Yuri says there's more potential above the 20% existing contribution to reducing EU carbon emissions. So where are the biggest opportunities to increase this figure? And is the renovation wave a significant opportunity? So I'll give you a minute or two just to answer that. Thank you.
Okay. So there are multiple opportunities. So indeed, the renovation wave is huge for the large forest-based sectors. Mrs. von der Leyen spoke about the European Bauhaus. That is a nice idea of thinking that what we managed to do 100 years ago, we could redo now with better materials and better solutions. So wooden construction materials for sure would be critical in doing that so that we build back better. But in other parts that are closer to SEPI family, in the pulp and paper sector, we have so many opportunities. So in, for example, packaging, there's studies saying that already now with the existing materials, so without further innovation, you can replace 25% of the plastic packaging with paper and board, which is 4.5 million tons of plastics reduced from the consumption from the market. Having this potential we have. But even there, with innovation, we can, of course, increase further. Or textiles. You have huge opportunities in having cellulose-based textiles that can replace both cotton, that is environmentally very questionable, or the man-made fibers that are causing microplastics in the water bodies. And we don't have any of that, but we have only the same good opportunities of those two materials in the way that they can be used. Or in lightweight materials that we can offer for even for space technologies.
Right.
So there's so many opportunities we have, and companies keep announcing innovations on daily basis. Literally on daily basis, we see news about this company there, that company there, innovating and bringing to market new solutions. And this is where the potential is all the time increasing and growing. But even in where Paul Brannan asked about the question of the renovation wave, also the wood and construction opportunities have increased so much in the past 10 years that we wouldn't have been able to do the construction with wood 10 years ago that we do now. And by the way, we can use some of our residues like lignin, that is a byproduct from making pulp for paper, in producing these bio-based glues for the new construction materials. So again, there's a lot of synergies between these forest-based industries.
Thank you. Do you know, when you say synergies, you sound like truly someone from the European Commission. That's a favourite Europe. I love it, but it's very true. I think I would say to you, we have this programme Mastermind in the UK, you know, where you sit in a chair and you answer on your specialist subject. I think you should be going on to Mastermind, because I think you would be absolutely win hands down in your knowledge of this sector and the way you have expounded this morning. So stay with me, because I'm actually going to say hello in just a moment to the SEPI chairman. So I'm just going to address our audience. Thank you very much for being with me for this first part, and for setting the scene and talking about some of these key issues and what's at stake. And we're going to unpack a bit more of that. But we are going to shift the focus now, ladies and gentlemen, really to coupling industry decarbonisation with resilience. That's what we're really looking at here. We talked about that. We talked about recycling and the difficulties in it not being enough, and where you've got these emissions in production and recycling. So we're going to explore all of that. So I'm going to ask now to join me a colleague of yours, Jori, which is, of course, the SEPI chairman, Ignazio Capuano. Now, he is joining us online. There he is.
Hello.
So, ladies and gentlemen, hello. You might see my eye line shift a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm looking at you down here, down the lens, but I'm also looking one or other side of the screen to see the gentleman who has joined. Just before we lose Jori, any of that in a nutshell, Ignazio, anything in 2 sentences that really resonated for you in what Jori was saying there? Anything that you would champion?
It was perfect. I have to spoil his message of what he said.
He was perfect. I love that. That's brilliant. Well, I think on that note, sir, you are allowed to leave the stage, and you
Thank you, Katrina.
Thank you so very much. And I can stay now with you, Ignazio. Now, I just remind our ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions, I'm going to have a bit of a chat with Ignazio. We're going to talk about the SEPI manifesto. But if you do have questions, keep them nice and short. You can input them at any time. And of course, a reminder that Ignazio is not just the SEPI chairman, but also the CEO of, I believe, is it right, 10 factories in Italy, 1 in Belgium, thousands of employees. So you've also got that hat on, and that's very, very useful. So I said that we were looking at this coupling industry decarbonisation with resilience. Energy consumption, energy, climate change, is that the Achilles heel for the sector, would you say?
I would say that is for sure is a problem, but is not our weakness. Because in the last 15 years, we have been reducing a lot our emission and our consumption of energy. So we reduce our CO2 emission by more than 28%, almost 29%, and we reduce our energy consumption by 12%. So it's been quite a big achievement, let me say. Then the other thing that I can also mention here is that we, as an industry, we contribute only for 0.7% of total European emission. So very, very small contribution. But as was said before, we participate absorbing by 20% the emission of the entire Europe. So it's very important. Here there is a slide that unfortunately I cannot read.
But I can, and I'm sure I can read it, so that's good. There we go. Now it's full screen for the audience. Do you see now?
Okay. So,
but you're wearing glasses, Ignazio. You still can't see?
No, because my screen is very, very small. That's why.
Okay. It looks like it's very, very far away as well, on the other side of the world. Anyway, we can see it.
Unfortunately, I could not be with you today because for this pandemic was almost impossible to reach Brussels. It was very complicated,
Indeed.
so I unfortunately had to give up. So coming back to what was your question, I said that we in the last 15 years we reduced a lot of emissions, we reduced a lot energy consumption. But we have, as industry, we have very, very diverse. We have a Nordic country, we have Southern and Central Europe countries, which have very different way to process to produce. So the Nordic are producing mainly virgin fiber, and they are utilizing fresh fiber, and their energy consumption is basically based on biomass, which is carbon neutral. In the other part of Europe, Central Europe, and mainly Southern Europe, of course, the main fuel is natural gas, which has another impact. But what is, let me also say that the biomass is almost 53% of total energy consumption of the industry, where natural gas is only 29%.
Right.
So it is quite important also these numbers.
Okay.
But what is more important that you have to look at the industry as a whole. So we have the virgin and we have the recycling, and one is input of the others, because the importance of the virgin are produced in the Nordic is recycled mainly in the Central and Southern Europe. And doing that, we prolong the duration of the storage of CO2 in the fiber, because paper is another way to store the CO2. Okay, so I think that is very, very important.
Thank you, and I think it's very useful also that you have been clear, because this is the challenge and the beauty of Europe is that there is commonalities and there's specificities in the member states. So just like you have a huge diversity in the industry as a whole, you've got a diversity, and you just gave some very good examples there, the comparison between the Nordic countries and Italy, for example. I'm going to switch now and talk specifically about targets, the 2030, the 2050 targets, the new ones. They're not easy for any sector, not least your own. They're very ambitious. But we know that this sector, yours, is really committed, doing a lot. How do you feel? Are you a little bit wary, skeptical about whether the targets can be achieved, or you're fully confident?
No, we are pretty confident, but then we have to come at what are the conditions for which we are confident. And we are so confident just 1 year ago, before a few weeks ahead of the Green Deal was announced and presented in the publicly, we issued the CEO initiative saying that basically we were supporting and we were fully support the target of carbon neutral in 2050. Let me say first a carbon neutral continent, by 2050. So we're already there. We were supporting that, and we started our, our study even before. In 2011, we issued our roadmap to 2015, which were addressed, maybe not so ambitious target, but the target in order to reduce our environmental impact over there, and what would be the best practice for that. But if you allow me, I want just to say that about recycling, the importance of this is that we have an utilization rate of 54%, which is very high. So 54% of total fiber is coming from recycling. So just the holistic approach and loop that we have in our industry.
Okay, and absolutely. And, you know, for somebody who comes outside the sector, the word holistic is something that really is now resonating a lot for me. It's a word that's it's come up a lot. You've spoken about what you've been doing. You mentioned there the CEO initiative. So you've clearly been walking the talk. There are challenges. Can you be specific just about a couple of the challenges, whether they're technical challenges, whether they're political challenges, just in a nutshell?
Nutshell.
Always in a nutshell. It's never easy. Sorry.
But, let me say, regarding the technical things, let me say that we have to work in 4 directions, in which we can reduce our emission and meet the target. One is energy efficiency. So look at what the industry can do, same things using less energy. So that's number one. Number two, I would say that we will need to replace the fossil fuel with other, let me say, renewable sources. That could be hydrogen, that we talk a lot now. It can be biogas, it can be geothermal, it can be solar thermodynamic. There are many, many things. Or, this is the third legs, I would say, it would be electricity that will be supplied directly from renewable sources from the grid. The fourth one that is, let me say, a little bit far ahead will be technology breakthrough in our paper making process. And so these are from the technical point of view, and we are touching all of them today. The other one, that policy.
What's your, I mean, you can combine this, but there are big political challenges. So if I had to say to you, right, what's your ask from the EU? What do you need from policy? What would you say to address those challenges?
To address the challenge, I would say that all of what I've said requires quite sizable amount of investment, number one. And the fact that our required investment needs that you have to create a comfort of a framework in which a company can operate. Because making investment, you cannot calculate the return, you cannot calculate how much you're going to spend, except for things that are not depending on you. That is very critical. Let me give you a very brief example. Electricity coming from green sources or renewable sources. This has to be first renewable, but then you need to build all the electrical infrastructure to deliver through the grid this electricity. So if I change my gas-fired boiler in electrical boiler, I would need huge power, electrical power, but I need also the infrastructure to deliver that. Yeah. So that's what we let me say, we could ask to EU is to have the framework and to give the support in financial terms in order to reduce the risk.
Yeah, and I think that's a good word that you use there, comfort. If companies are investing, they need stability, they need comfort, they need to know what they're dealing with. I have to ask, and this is, I hope, going to take us into the manifesto, which would be great, because I'd like us to share that with the audience, that obviously everybody is a part of this across every stakeholder. So therefore I say, what do you ask from the EU, from policy in general? So what do you think industry should expect to contribute, should be willing to contribute, whether in terms of investment or across the board?
For sure, the investment to develop the technology that is required. That's our commitment. In order to support to provide that the product that has been described before, that are made from the forest, they are sustainable for the environment. As I said, we as a company, we need to be confident on the future. So we have to know that our product can be will be in the future. So, for example, to have priority into the market for products that are made from sustainable resources. So that's a very simple example. These has to be regulatory. The second one, let me say, could be that within Europe we have the same rules. Today there are not homogeneous rules, for example, regarding investment. In certain countries, some things is doable, in others are considered state aid. So we need a more homogeneous framework for doing that. Then, of course, we come to something that should be both in the recovery fund and also in the transition fund, that there will be the support to develop these, let me say, fossil-free fuel. As I said, H2, so hydrogen, rather than biogas. These, in my opinion, will take some time to develop in terms of, especially in terms of cost competitiveness. So we need to have something that is today could be cost competitive. Otherwise, our industry will be put out of the market. So we come to the fourth request that I would make is that we should, I mean, the policymaker should really not to protect, but doing such a thing by having the same rules applied in the other for the same product. I mean, in the same product, if we need to respect certain environmental rules, the same should be applied elsewhere. So, for example, the mechanism of ETS is working, and I would say that this should be kept in place.
Can I just let me come in here? Am I understanding that we are, I mean, the policy asks and where there is importance and where you're saying, you know, this is really what we need is part of this 2030 manifesto? I mean, you've been very clear in the manifesto of what you need, or we can sort of segue into that, because I think it would be good to just reinforce why you've got what the drivers for this manifesto are.
The driver of the manifesto is very simple. It's coming today because there are, as we said, that there are a lot of policies that they are going to make in the next year.
Yeah.
So we need to indicate to the policymaker what is needed for us. And in the manifesto that you briefly showed, there are a few, let me say, a few points of what is our position in terms of regulatory framework that can promote the risk. Because another thing that I didn't mention is that the time horizon of our investment, according to the four direction that I told you, require a different time horizon, also in terms of return. And we will need the financial assistance to make profitable for the company that are going toward the direction. We will need to have a transition from fossil fuel, as we said, to cleaner fuel, and shouldn't be industry or sector that will be privileged in accessing to that. I like very much what Yori was saying before about that maybe we are too good. So we had the first row student in the classroom, but so the teacher is not looking at us, but is taking care only of the troublemakers. So that could be is a very good picture
analogy
of the situation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let me just, because I'm conscious, I've got my eye on the clock and I have a couple of other questions. And of course, there is a poll that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to ask you yet, but there is a poll. So we will come to that. And if there are up, there it is, it's up there already. We can see the biggest challenge. There is a poll, Ignazio, here. What's the biggest challenge for energy and climate change for me is, and lack of policy support, access to finance, lack of breakthrough innovation, access to clean energy or other. Now, because you were squinting at your screen, in case you cannot see this, the biggest challenge for energy and climate change, I will read to you, 55% believe access to clean energy, and then 27% cite lack of policy support, and then in joint third place, lack of breakthrough innovation. You spoke of that yourself, breakthrough innovation, and then other. So let me just what I understand is that climate and energy is very much at the heart of your preoccupations. You've had this groundbreaking plan for deep decarbonisation. You've talked about some of those areas policy-wise where you've got specific asks, regulatory support to help you go further. Before we come to looking whether any questions have come in, what does the future look like for your industry? I mean, if you had to explain it, what do you see when you put your pillow, no, not your pillow over your face, your head on the pillow at night? How do you see the future of your industry? What's going through your head? And then I can see questions come in.
But look, I think that, let me say, our challenge is really to explain the value of our industry to the world, to policymakers, to consumers, to also our customers. So that's the first thing. Just to show what we said today in terms of importance and what really our industry can do, just replacing almost all of different products made from fossil fuel. So that is, I think, it would be our challenge. So effort for us to explain what we can do and we do for the environment, and how we contribute for the climate change.
Okay, thank you. And I've got another question for you, but I'm just going to take the question that's come in from the audience, which is, I don't know if you can see that, but would you expect the US to follow the EU on the Green Deal? And that comes from Asko Huitinen, whose name, sorry, Asko, not pronounced particularly well, who is CEO of Strategy First Limited. So would you expect the US to follow the EU on the Green Deal? Not just would you hope, but do you expect?
I have a counter question. Who will be the next president of the US?
I already joked about that. You heard that earlier. Okay. Fair response.
No, I didn't hear. No, I would say that according to what we know is the president-elect should let me say, change the position from the United States, so will be much more environmental friendly than the other one. So I would say that maybe will be not so orthodox like a European, but they will make some improvement. How much, frankly speaking, I have no idea.
Okay, thank you. And just while we wait and see if anything else comes in, I'm just coming back to you. Again, I said, you know, you're sort of here with two hats on, not just as chairman, but as a CEO of not a few factories. Am I allowed to ask a question, actually, or you want to?
Sure. Just to correct you, it's 11 in Italy, not 10. Sorry.
Oh, it's 11 in Italy, but you've got in Belgium 11. Too, no?
Okay. Yeah, one in Belgium. Yes, big one.
Okay. I love the way you say, okay, I don't mind. You say 10, you say 11, I don't care. There's a lot of factories. That. What am I saying? No, you are very important. Facts. This is what we're in talking of, you know, facts, very important. I just want to, for a moment, because it comes up in a lot of the stuff I moderate, sorry, not stuff, topics, sectors, SMEs. And I don't know if you wanted to just say something, just a little something on financing. So how can you ensure that the financing to support investments, because you talked about energy savings, energy efficiency, reaches the industries such as the paper industry and particularly the SMEs that might be struggling?
There are, there are projects, for example, that, let me talk about my experience in Italy. Okay, that is, will be more practical. So if there is a procedure by which if you make a project that you can calculate, you have also to demonstrate year by year that you reduce CO2 emission, you get some grants by which you can, for example, investment, you change your steam boiler or your hood in the drying section, and you can show and demonstrate that you reduce emission of CO2, you get some grant in order to, let me say, anticipate the return of it. So if an investment will take 5 years, through these certificates that you get every year, you can reduce by 2 to 3 years. So it's a way. These are open for all the companies. Let me say, also in technology, that is not to go to Mars, but is, let me say, very well-known technology, that in any case, every single drop helps to reach our goal.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's a nice, if I may, that's a nice note to end on, because I do ask you to come back at the end, but you've covered so much ground with me. I really do thank you. You've been very, very specific on the policy asks that are very important for industry. You've been clear about the diversity across the whole value chain, but also, of course, across member states and where the challenges are. We've looked at the manifesto. You've had your CEO of 12 companies. There you go. I've got it, Ignacio, hat on. So it's been an absolute pleasure. And if you can please relax off screen, but do stay tuned, because I'm going to ask you to come back at the end for some last audience takeaways. What really resonated for you? Perhaps if there was something missing that you can give our audience something to chew on and feel inspired by as we close the event. So I will see you very shortly. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming back to you because we are going to glide seamlessly into the third and final part of this high-level session. So I said there were 3 parts, and we've looked at 2 of those parts. And the third, which we've already had a whiff of that, particularly in the conversation that I had with Yuri at the outset, looking and unpacking a little bit, how can the new EU forest strategy support the European Green Deal? And this was the second big policy challenge that was considered by Yuri. So we have the great privilege to have a lady from Berlin, a representative of the German EU presidency, join us. Her name is Dr. Eva Müller. She is Director General, there she is, joining us on screen. Hello, Director General for Forests, Sustainability and Renewable Resources at the German Federal Ministry for Food and Agriculture. So I'm so delighted. I'm shifting my eyes away from our audience now and to you, because I see you on the screen there, Dr. Müller. And what's great is that you're going to present to us in sort of 8, 9, 10 minutes the perspective of the German presidency on the EU strategy for forests. And of course, I say to you, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question or two for Dr. Müller during her presentation, don't hesitate to post your question in the Q&A. So there we go. The floor is yours. Thank you so very much.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the virtual floor here. First of all, I would like to thank SEPI for inviting me to speak on behalf of the European Council presidency here. Well, 2020 is a very important year for forests in the European Union because there are important strategic directions that are being set for the coming years. And first and foremost, of course, this is the European Green Deal announced by Ursula von der Leyen, which lays the foundation for a greener future in the EU. Secondly, there is the new EU biodiversity strategy that was presented by the Commission in May and is part of the Green Deal. Third, there is the reform of the common agricultural policy, and then, of course, the ongoing discussions on the perspectives for a new post-2020 EU forest strategy the Commission plans to present in 2021. I will come to the forest strategy in a minute. I just want to first put the issue of the EU forest-related policies into perspective. Now, even though forest policy is not part of the EU treaty, as a matter of fact, there's a great number of EU policies and processes that have a considerable influence on forest policy in the EU, and consequently also in the member states. And I'm thinking here particularly of climate policies, energy, biodiversity, agriculture, bioeconomy, and trade policies. And this underlines, on the one hand, the significance of the multifunctional role of forests and the positive fact that forests are being given greater attention in the political and public debates. On the other hand, it also reflects an increasing policy fragmentation when it comes to forests, as the objectives of the different policies are not always coherent, and coordination and consistency is often missing. More and more, this results in debates about who is actually responsible for what. And many member states have therefore repeatedly emphasized that as the EU treaty makes no provision on the common forest policy of the EU, the competence continues to lie with the member states, and that the subsidiarity principle must be respected. Now, coming to the European Green Deal, it sets an ambitious climate policy objective for the future. This is, of course, very important as it will contribute to achieving the climate objectives of the Paris Agreement. As we all know, forests play an important role in this context, and in fact, sustainably managed forests and the multiple products of the forest-based industries in Europe are already contributing significantly to meeting climate objectives. And they should continue doing so in the future. But with regard to forest policy, it seems to us that the Green Deal needs to be complemented. In particular, the multifunctional role of forests and the many and diverse contributions of forests to the internationally agreed development goals could be addressed more explicitly. According to the Green Deal, the new EU forest strategy is expected to build on the biodiversity strategy. In fact, the biodiversity strategy already contains several specific forest-related proposals that aim at retaining the functions of forests for both biodiversity and climate. But as we all know, our forests are multi-talents and they can do much more than that. They create jobs, they deliver a wide range of products, and they are important for our physical and mental health, as we have seen particularly recently during the pandemic. Therefore, the new forest strategy should take into account the entire spectrum of forest functions for the environment, for the economy, and for society. Under the German presidency of the European Council, member states just adopted Council conclusions on the planned new EU forest strategy. These Council conclusions are intended to provide the Commission with concrete guidance for the development of a balanced and strengthened post-2020 forest strategy. And through the Council conclusions, member states call for a forest strategy that helps to achieve the objectives of multifunctional and sustainable forest management according to the 3 pillars of sustainability and in line with the internationally agreed principles such as the Forest Europe principles and definition. That also promotes the forest and forest-based sector with the entire value chains as a solution-oriented sector with regard to international development goals and other policy targets. A strategy that reiterates the member states' competence as regards forest policy and the subsidiarity principle, and that it helps to improve coordination and coherence of EU forest-related policies, as well as strengthening cooperation of member states and the Commission. Now, with regard to a specific substance, member states would like to see a forest strategy that concentrates on 3 key areas. First, strengthening the resilience and adaptive capacity of forests. Second, maintaining and enhancing forest biodiversity, and here specifically building on lessons learned in the framework of the European-wide network Integrate. And third, promoting and further developing the contribution of forests and the forest-based sector to a competitive European bioeconomy and circular economy. And member states also wish to see coherence between the different strategies: biodiversity strategy, bioeconomy strategy, circular economy action plan, and climate-related EU policy targets. Now, in doing so, it is important to also look at the potential impacts of other sector policies. And let me use the example of the EU biodiversity strategy and its specific protection targets to illustrate this. This concerns in particular the target of 30% protected areas and 10% strictly protected areas, and the envisaged protection of not yet defined old growth forests. According to preliminary studies of our scientists, these protection targets could lead to up to 40% of domestic timber demand not being met within the EU by 2050. And this would lead most likely to considerable leakage effects in other forest regions outside of the EU. The Council conclusions also propose ways to strengthen the EU forest strategy in terms of its strategic and political impact, but also its implementation and impact on the ground. This includes, for instance, the proposal to build EU-wide networks of experts from the forestry and timber sector, the environment, the scientific community, and politics, on key subjects to be addressed under the future EU forest strategy and at EU level. Let me mention again the Integrate network that involves 16 member states and offers practical approaches to the integration of nature conservation into regular sustainable forest management. And it serves as a good example in this respect because it demonstrates how networking of experts and the active involvement of member states can shape and help implement EU forest strategy objectives. In addition to that, the Commission is requested to develop mechanisms under the EU forest strategy for an enhanced but targeted voluntary exchange of information on measures to implement specific objectives of the strategy at member state level. Such an approach would help countries to respond to the increasing challenge they have to prove, to demonstrate, and to communicate the forest sector's sustainability in a transparent manner. Now, let me conclude by emphasizing again that to us, sustainable forestry is an essential part of the solution to meet and support the EU and global policy objectives. And if this is our common understanding, let us work together to develop a strong EU forest strategy and to achieve a sound and sustainable balance in the forest-related policies at EU level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to switch actually my eyes because I have the choice of two screens, so it might be a bit squiffy for the audience. I hope it's not. I think, unless I'm not correct, there are no questions as yet, but I think that was a very considered and comprehensive viewpoint, and I think it was very useful also to bring in there the international development goals and to put the forests and all of the demands and their use and a lot of lack of knowledge, I think, about the forests and the demands on forests into that global context. I just want to ask, I mean, this morning I was talking with Yuri and he was saying, just latterly, about some of his concerns about what policymakers may not or may be aware of and some misperceptions. And you talked there about the need to communicate. I mean, what do you feel? Do you think that there might be a lack of knowledge of that complexity of forests amongst policymakers? Do you think that the industry needs to do more to communicate itself?
Of course, there's always a lack of knowledge. We can never know enough. But I think the issue here is that we need to communicate a message to the world. And I think this is very important, especially for the forest industry. And this message is that we need managed forests. We need forest production for various reasons. And I think all of these have been mentioned before, because forests contribute to mitigating climate change. They provide a whole range of services. But they also provide services to us, to the people, meaning we like to use wood, but we don't like to see trees cut in the forests. We like to go to forests and visit them, but we don't like to see, areas where forests are being harvested. So for the public, sometimes it's difficult to understand that all of this goes together. And so we have a message to communicate that is not so easy. It's easier to say, oh, we have to protect our forests to maintain biodiversity. It's not so easy to say we have to manage our forests to not only protect biodiversity and ensure climate protection, but also to continue to create jobs and to provide products to society that we all want and need.
Thank you. And I was going to come there. I thought it was really helpful that you articulated particularly that this issue of jobs, of people's physical and mental well-being, that it's very important to see that this is the economic, the environmental, the social, that is all bound up together, and it's complicated. Just one other question because of this international context that you evoked there, and again talking with Yuri, saying that, you know, this is a very European industry in as much as you've got the technology, you've got the fibres, you've got the recycling, you're replacing forests, you're even exporting, I think 22%, or I might have got that percentage wrong, so forgive me. So this is a very European ecosystem. Do you have any concept of how it sits globally? You know, we just had a question come in on the European Green Deal, will the US follow? Do you have any sense of whether Europe is a front runner there? Whether it's, you know, it could be seen as a beacon of inspiration at a global level?
I believe so. I believe Europe is really a front runner at the global level. I've been working a lot internationally and a lot with developing countries, and coming from Germany, in our country that has 300 years of tradition of sustainable forest management, where the term sustainability was actually invented 300 years ago in forestry. A lot of the countries look to Europe for inspiration on how to actually manage this complexity of multifunctional forest management, meaning that, you know, you produce in the forest, but you also ensure that forests continue to provide services on the ecological side, but also services for people.
Thank you. I am going to thank you very, very much for joining us today. I know that you've got to actually be somewhere else, so I'm going to give you good time to transition to another meeting. I think it's actually also online. I'm not sure, but very, very helpful and really given us plenty of food for thought, also to explore in more detail in this third part of this high-level session. So to Dr. Eva Müller, I thank you very, very much, and I wish you luck in your future endeavours. So you may relax off screen. Thank you. And I turn back to you, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, because I have the privilege, again, at the requisite social distance, of a live speaker joining me here. In fact, he's walking in as I address you. He is the Raw Materials Director at CEPI, Ulrich Lebele. Again, during my chats with him, if you have a question, don't hesitate. There will be another poll towards the end of this third part of the high-level session, but I'd like Ulrich to share his thoughts with me first. So lovely. You look incredibly dapper. You look like you're going to a wedding, and that's a compliment, I promise you. You look absolutely superb. I think my first question to you for this third part of our session, well, we had a really nice sort of introduction to it there from the German presidency.
Absolutely,
because I think
yes.
she articulated perhaps some of what you might have been wanting to say yourself, because my question is, well, actually, I'm gonna phrase my question differently. Of all of those functions of forests, what's the most important function of forests?
Thanks for the introduction and the nice words. So indeed, we have not so many occasions to dress up anymore, do we? So it's
Virtually none.
It's but we have a lot of occasions to go to the forest, and I think that is something that is positive about this time. Many people discover the forest now, and we see that that they have this this impression that the forest is, of course, an ecosystem for recreation, but we have so many more demands. So we have heard about climate change. Forests should solve the climate crisis. We have an energy crisis, and bioenergy is also counting on the forest to deliver that. Biodiversity was mentioned by Eva Müller before, but there are many more. Our sectors is, of course, also based on the forest and coming from the forest, and so there are many more of those expectations to the forest, and I think there is not just one of them, indeed.
And it is very complex, I know. So, for ladies and gentlemen, if you, by the way, if you want to address the audience, you don't have to use my camera. You have your own over there. Should you need to say something directly, even if it's "Hello, Mum," that's where you need to look. Otherwise, the slides. So, if the audience, if you see his eyes shifting, that's also because he's looking at slides. We're going to see a couple of slides. So, I have really taken on board the complexity. However, what we did hear there from Dr. Müller was this sustainable forest, sorry, not forage, although you can forage in a forest, sustainable forest management. So I was under the impression that all of this complexity could be addressed through that, but possibly no, it still seems to be very complicated. Tell me more.
Yes, so sustainable forest management is an answer to lots of these challenges and how to balance the different functions. We have this concept for a long time, but Eva Müller explained well that SFM is not regulated at European level, at least not at the European EU level. It has been worked on in the Forest Europe between the member states, and in contrast to many legislations, we have legislations that address the forests, but not for supporting the forest, but rather for supporting their sectorial objectives, be it in climate, be it in energy, be it in environment, and all of those policies, criteria are developed to make sure they don't have negative impacts on the forest. For example, for the financial sector, criteria are being developed. For renewable energy, criteria are developed, but those are not necessarily the same, while the forest owner, when planting the forest and managing the forest, it's not yet super clear which tree will go into which end sector, and that is the challenge, that we have so many different impacting forest policies.
Indeed.
And that is why sustainable forest management is an answer, but not in terms of EU regulation so far.
And indeed, and those policies, I mean, are really quite diverse, because it's not just, you know, the climate side of things, but it's also, I think, it's the financial side of things. I mean, it's really, there is a lot of different competing policies that come into play there. So, I mean, my obvious question is, how can the new forest strategy, we heard the stage that it's at there from the German presidency, how can it contribute to sorting this out, do you think?
We see that the forest strategy needs to be a strong tool to bring this together, and have a tool to prevent from conflicting sustainability criteria on the very same source. So one of our really main tasks in the paper industry from CEPI is to make sure that the forest strategy should establish again this risk-based approach to sustainable forest management that has been already taken in the Renewable Energy Directive second version, and develop that further so that it becomes a general sustainability approach on forest management for Europe, because then that can be applied throughout different forest impacting policies, and that is a work that has already been started in the Standing Forestry Committee long time ago, and that is also the place where the forest strategy should give a mandate to continue that work, so that we avoid conflicting criteria depending on the policy that is looking at the forest, but have one set for in general. That is a main ask and the main expectation from our sector on this forest strategy.
So, you know, as I understand it, and as we've heard earlier in the session, it's all to sort of encapsulate what I've been hearing from everybody, and now from your good self. It's not enough to look just at the forest contribution on the carbon sinks and the stocks, but the whole dynamics, taking into account the storage in the harvested wood products, the I can't speak.
Substitution.
Thank you so much. I've been at the vodka at lunchtime. The substitution, that's very critical. Did you want to share slides? Did you take time enough to share what you needed to share?
I think I've explained the main the main points. Here we have, of course, then another wider range of policies that all have some also sustainability grounds in there. I mentioned biodiversity, I mentioned the financial sector and renewable energy, but there are many more, and the forest sector is used to cover sustainability criteria through legislation in the member states, through certification, but there shouldn't be one another set of criteria on top of each other's, but rather have one common framework for that.
That makes very good sense to me as someone coming from outside the sector. Now, I think I want to check with you that, because I'm going to very shortly, I have my eye on the clock, going to bring in our last speaker from the European Commission, because it kind of completes the picture. But before I do, is there anything else before I move on that is important for you to say, you know, in our chat or as a key message, or have you shared the main?
Yeah, one more point maybe. Eva Müller told about biodiversity strategy, and that the Green Deal says that the forest strategy should build upon it.
Yeah.
In our view, what is important in that relation is that the forest-specific elements of the biodiversity strategy should be continued to be developed under the forest strategy, with the member states and the Standing Forest Committee, with the European Commission. I think that is an additional important point in addition to this general sustainability framework for forest management.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your conciseness and your clarity. Stay with me, please, because I'd like you to stay with me also to answer any questions that might come in, but no less to just hear from our final speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the final speaker, I can see him waiting to join us, and it's great because we have a representative from the European Commission. He's head of unit LULUCF and Finance for Innovation at DG Klima. His name is Christian Holzleitner. I'm sure many of you, I would imagine, know this gentleman. I'm sure that you will be eager to hear his contributions. So welcome. It's delightful that you could join us. Hello. Yes, I like the nicely positioned mirror/lamp. I'm not sure what it is there. And the door, that's good. You are well framed there, sir. So we have Ulrich here with us, and I've got some questions for you. And you've kind of sort of got the nice slot because you've been able to hear what people have said. So you've heard, you know, the expectations from the council. We've heard industry. We've heard the concerns there. We've particularly heard this focus on this coherence. You know, there are so many competing, you know, policy aims, and so much is impacting, and that there's this real sense of coherence that is required. What is your view on the future of the bioeconomy and the forests? Can we start with that, please, Christian?
Yes. Good afternoon, and thanks very much for the invitation. Pleasure to be with you. I mean, we've put out this vision of a climate neutral economy in 2050. So, which means that on balance, the European economy shouldn't emit any more greenhouse gases in 2050. And to reach this, the bioeconomy is so important. Because think about it, in 2050, we will hardly have fossil fuels anymore. But we still need a CO2 as a feedstock for the industry. I mean, you've had examples before. So, and from where would we get the CO2 in 2050? We can either get it from biomass or we can get it through direct air capture. So there's an essential role for the bioeconomy there and for the forests. At the same time, to reach climate neutrality, we need to store much more CO2 in our forests. So we need these carbon removals. And if we go beyond 2050, we may need to store even more carbon in our forests. to prevent the negative consequences of climate change. So, and at the same time, we need also to manage, and we need to store that CO2 there, because we will still have a lot of emissions from livestock, also from the bioeconomy. So we need to manage also there the emissions. So when we talk about 2050, from a climate perspective, we very much talk about the bioeconomy, and we have so much more demands than for 2050, and because we need the biofeedstock, we need the production of food, we need the carbon removals, the carbon storage. So what we want to do now, being in 2020, we want to get the market conditions for this right. 30 years may seem a long time period, but in terms of forests, it's around the corner. So I very much agree with what has been said before, to look at the multifunctionality of forests, and to get it right, to get the incentives right. And what we are doing from a climate perspective there, we come with our Fit for 55 package in June next year, where we will set out the direction of travel for how we want to store more carbon in our forests, how we want to have more sustainable biomass products, more sustainable harvested wood products. And at the same time, we are starting our work on creating better incentives for carbon removals. So the certification of carbon removal credits, with which we want to come in 22, 23, on carbon farming. So on how can we set better incentives at the level of farmers and foresters, and how to make this more sustainable bioeconomy that we need for 2050, how to make this a better business opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, and a very comprehensive response there. I'm going to, because I'm keeping my eye very much on the clock, and I want to give you also a chance to, I've got a couple more questions for you. Everybody's commented from the outset on the forest strategy, so of course I have to come to you and ask you, what is the role of the forest strategy? There's a recently published roadmap, so tell us what your perspective is on this, please.
I think for me, it's very much about creating win-win solutions. So we have to show how we can put together climate, biodiversity, and, as I said, make it good business. So from my side, I would like to see very concrete actions in the forest strategy. So some flagship initiatives, like Executive Vice President Timmermans has put out the challenge of planting 3 billion additional trees in Europe. So how can we do this best in view of the objectives I've said before? Where would we plant them? How can we make it a win for climate as well as for biodiversity? How can we finance it? How can we better mobilize the resources of the common agricultural policy for forestry? How can we get better incentives on carbon removal credits? There's a large demand out there from companies who want to offset their emissions. How can we create there a good market? Then, of course, discuss restoration, how to adapt to the impacts of climate change. We see the large impact, in particular in Central Europe on our forests, but also in the Mediterranean. How to get better incentives for harvested wood products. It was also mentioned before. There are a lot of examples. Maybe I would like to emphasize the link to the renovation wave. So how can we also there have better long-lived construction materials? So, and how can we create around all of that a better business model? So one of my primary examples is there always the rewetting of drained peatland. So there are great initiatives around in Europe that look into this. Rewetting drained peatlands is an important carbon storage. That's very powerful. At the same time, you can do a lot for biodiversity. And then looking into, okay, how can you still make business with a re-wetted peatland? So there are many ideas around there. To which extent you could do paludiculture, you could still make a forestry on there. You could use it for production of renewable energy, for example, solar energy, and so on. So the more we can have their concrete examples, how we can get this going, the better for me the forest strategy would be.
Okay.
So not too much of technical or conceptual discussion, but really looking at concrete initiatives. How can we make it better?
You are clear. Thank you. And I'm only coming now because I've got my eye on the clock and I need to invite Ignacio back at the end, and we have a question. But a last one for you. And I heard a lot of hows. So there's a lot of, this is how we should be thinking. How can we do this? How can we do that? How should we balance that? But as you said, a lot of initiatives, a lot of concrete stuff. Any other ways in which the Commission can concretely, I'm using that word again, support the transition? I know that you've got a launch on December the 1st. Could you just literally in 3 or 4 sentences, because we're going to take a question and then I'm going to ask the audience to take part in a poll. So ladies and gentlemen of the audience, bear with me. We might go about probably go about 7 minutes over 2:30, but don't switch off. Please do stay with us until the end because I do get to bring the SEPI chairman back. So yes, talk to us about this this launch on the first call that you're launching on the 1st of December.
Yes, I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk about this. We will launch on 1st of December our first call under the Innovation Fund for small-scale projects. So these are projects up to 7.5 million euros capital expenditure. And what we are looking here is about the scale-up of clean tech. So the first time you really use at commercial scale an innovative solution. We talked a lot, for example, before about the use of fibers, be it in textiles, be it in packaging, and so on. So, and I know in particular that in this project size of up to 7.5 million euros, there are a lot of projects in the paper industry where we could support the breakthrough innovation. I think that's also something that was said before. So we will have a launch event next Thursday on 19th of November, where we will tell in more detail how this call will look like. We're in particular looking for projects in the bioeconomy, in projects with sustainable biomass, biofeedstocks. So I would invite you to look out for that opportunity, and that's also something where we could really look at the whole value chain from the forest to the fiber.
Okay, thank you very much. And just, I heard you say this Thursday, as in, it's in this Thursday. Yeah, I always have to say that. Not next one, not next week, this Thursday on the 19th.
This one, 19th.
Indeed. So we have a question here. You've seen the question, and I don't know whether you can see that question, Christian, if you want to come in.
No.
If it's a question that's coming from Arti Fagerblom, who is Manager of Energy and Climate Policy in the Finnish forest industries. And the question is, we've seen that wood, carbon stored in the forest doesn't stay there. I love this. There are forest fires and bark beetles having a party. I'd quite like to see a bark beetle party. That would be really interesting. Shouldn't we focus on reducing fossil emissions? So I don't know whether there is a comment from,
I can go first.
Yes,
I've seen it for a bit
you
longer.
have seen, you've been staring like this at it. So
Christian can think about it.
Gentlemen, super short, please.
Super short. So you type bark beetle party on the internet. I'm sure you find out how they do that. I think there's a point. If you focus too much just on the sink function in the end and you don't manage anymore for other forest functions, you miss opportunities for adapting the forest to the climate change, and then there are calamities, and the carbon emissions go up without any use in the end of the life. So indeed, it is, as was also said by German presidency before, we need give that understanding that we need a actively managed forest for different function. Active managed forest doesn't mean only managing for bioenergy or for packaging or whatever it be, but active management to make sure all functions are met in the best possible way.
Does that resonate? Would you, I mean, really short answer, Christian, does that resonate with you, that answer? Would you agree if we focus too much on the sink, you just can't adapt the forest and we need to take that broader view because otherwise emissions are just going to go up?
No, I mean, I think adaptation to climate change is so essential that we can have the future sink. And this is what you see like in Central Europe. I mean, with the reforestation of these plots of land where the bark beetles had their party, we must plant the right species there that are now adapted to the new climate. And only then we will have a sustainable sink there. So this all goes together. So I think in particular in forests, you have to think about mitigation, so the carbon sequestration and the adaptation to climate change together. This cannot be separated. And this is, I think, one of the topics that we want to address in the forest strategy.
Thank you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If anybody is tweeting, somebody, please, for goodness sake, talk about the partying bark beetles. If I don't see that on Twitter afterwards, I will literally cry. So thank you, gentlemen. Don't go away just a moment, because it might be interesting for you to see a last poll. The minutes are ticking by. I'm about to ask, I hope he's still there, Ignazio, to join. But there is a last poll. We're looking at what is the most important function of forests in Europe. That was the question that I first posed to you, Ulrich. So here we have mitigation of climate change, provision of renewable raw material, protection of biodiversity, space for recreation, all of the above, none of the above. Thank goodness no one put none of the above. Does that surprise you? You see the 243, provision of renewable raw material there, and then of course all of the above. Does that pretty much, is that what you would have expected as an answer?
Yeah, I think it speaks for the public that all of the above I think is something that we have heard here in the conference. The focus on renewable raw material is also because that helps the other functions as well. So not a lot of surprise, and yeah, speaks for the audience today.
Thank you. Thank you so much to you for joining me live. Greatly appreciated. Christian, I'm going to release you now, and I thank you so much. It's both tricky and actually it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to be the last speaker. But you were a very necessary last speaker, so thank you for coming with the perspective of the Commission there. Very, very helpful. Something, I don't know if it's me, is making strange sounds, but I can release you, Christian, and I can release you, Ulrich. Thank you so very much. And I will turn back to you, ladies and gentlemen, because I can see Ignazio waiting. Don't know if it's me moving, making a strange sound. I'm not sure. Might be Ignazio. So welcome back. I've got to ask you to be super concise so we don't lose any of our audience at the end. But I did want to give you the opportunity, Ignazio, to just say what particularly resonated, what you heard, if there's anything you wanted to underline, and anything that you missed that you want to underline. But it really does have to be a cool 60 seconds. So the floor is yours.
I will try to, I am quite synthetic. I have, let me say, a few things that I would like to address to the audience, and is read the manifesto. In our manifesto that we have published today, that you'll find in our website, basically we are mapping out the way in which our industry can deliver potential for carbon reduction. And also what we ask is the policymaker to sustain these, that from what we have heard is very, very important. One thing that I missed to say is that we have a very important tomorrow will be the CEPI Energy Solution Forum that regards the transition. This also is very important. It's linked to what the EU policymaker can do for the industry, and then at the end for the entire Europe. For us as a CEPI, I think, as I said before, communication to the world, the benefit that our industry can bring. And the last thing for the policymaker is that these are investment, are not subsidies, because that's the way Europe can take a lead in technology, in green technology, which is very important for the future. So we can teach others how they can be green and can be, let me say, good for the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And do you know what? I see that I have actually been hastier than I thought. So I'm just going to check in with you if you absolutely have said all that you need to say. Are you all spoken out? You're all spoken out. Okay. Thank you so very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. It's felt with your liveliness as though you have been in the room with me as well. So I thank you for your passion and your expertise. It has been a very essential contribution today. So thank you. I may release you, and I'm going to close things up for the audience. I hope that you have enjoyed, well, the whole day for a start. That's important. It's not finished because, of course, right up until 4 o'clock, you've still got the opportunity to hook up with your peers in the one-on-one networking sessions. So please don't forget to do that. That's what they're there for. We're trying to reproduce the missing networking that you don't get from being face-to-face. It's been a great pleasure for me to be coming into a sector that I didn't know at all. And what I, coming from the outside, have picked up is incredible, not just expertise, but a real passion for it. And it's opened my eyes as a consumer, as a person who loves forests genuinely, to all of those different competing demands. And particularly I can see where this insistence and this call for coherence across all of those different policy areas is a big call, and I can see that there is really quite some ask from the EU forest strategy. So that is very clear to me. Working together out of the silos, that very much came across, and not least because there's a diversity of actors, all of you, along the value chain, but also, of course, across the different member states with their different specificities. But I feel that you're a great sector, that yes, you're champions, but it was very clear to me from Yuri that you're not going to rest back on your laurels. That is absolutely clear. There is a way to go to embrace those big ambitions and big challenges in the European Green Deal. So it just remains for me to thank a few people. I do want to thank all the speakers. You've been fabulous. Just the fact that you joined on time from virtually is brilliant. All the ones who kept their distance here but helped to bring all of that energy and vibe at these CEPI premises. Thank you so much. Thank you to the very hard-working organising team. Difficult under COVID circumstances to do this virtually, so thank you, you've been brilliant. A special nod here, and I hope I pronounced her name right, to Katarzyna de Long, because she has really coped with a lot of sort of changing pieces in the chessboard. Thank you so much to the brilliant technical team here. There's quite a technical team behind the scenes. Thank you to today's fantastic moderators, not least the lovely Claire Couet, who kicked things off. And of course, thank you so much for you for turning up, tuning in, and also taking part in the polls and asking some questions. It absolutely makes my job easier. And the last bossy thing I of course have to say to you is 9 o'clock tomorrow. Please don't be late. Be there or be square, as we used to say at school. And on that note, thank you so very much. Perhaps we will meet in person, but before that, stay safe, prudent and responsible over the Christmas season, please. And I wish you all very well. Thank you and goodbye.